Are you kidding me, Rowan? It's Yo-Yo Ma at Benaroya. We've had these box seats for months. Don't turn your chaos into our emergency. My father's voice ricocheted through the tiny ER room at Virginia Mason on First Hill, clean and bright as a cymbal crash. I held the phone away from my ear, like distance could soften what he'd just said. The fluorescent lights hummed above me. I tasted metal. I'm not asking for a favor, I whispered, half curled on the gurney, and four in my arm and a thin blanket doing nothing for the December chill crawling under my skin. Dr. Alvarez found free fluid on the ultrasound. They think something ruptured. I need someone with August and Lila until they take me in. From the plastic chairs near the curtain, my twins were small, quiet shapes. August cross-legged, building an anxious city out of tongue depressors. Lila pressing stickers one by one onto the toe of her boot. The kind pediatric tech had scrounged crayons and a juice box. They were 3. They knew this room meant mommy was small and hooked to tubes. They didn't know anything else. Your brother Weston is coming over, my mother chimed in, syrup thick and brittle. We're driving into downtown soon. Parking will be a nightmare with the tree lighting at Westlake. Why do you always call it the worst times? The worst times. As if I had scheduled the dart of pain that had folded me on my kitchen floor an hour ago. As if I had ordered the warm blooms spreading behind my navel, the nausea, the dizziness that had turned my living room into a slow carousel. As if I had a say when Dr. Alvarez pressed the probe into my abdomen and murmured, internal bleeding like a secret. Please, I said, tasting the word. I can't bring them into surgery with me. On the other end, a breath. The rustle of my mother's silk scarf against her phone case. Rowan, you're always so dramatic. Remember last time? It was just gastritis. Last time had been a panic attack I'd hidden behind a smile and 2 extra shifts. Last time I'd gone home, cooked mac and cheese and pretended I wasn't broken. This time there was an ultrasound image like a storm cloud in a black and white sky. This time Dr. Alvarez had looked me in the eye and said, "We need to move fast." A sharp rap at the door. Nurse Amaya slid in, eyes gentle, scrubs patterned with tiny mountain ranges. "Vitals again, sweetheart." He glanced at my phone at the way I was trying not to tremble. "Any luck?" I forced a smile she didn't buy. Yo-Yo Ma is apparently more urgent than my blood. Amaya's mouth tightened, not unkindly. He wrapped the cuff around my arm, clicked the monitor. "I can call social work," she offered softly. "We have a list of emergency sitters who are cleared. It's New Year's week, but..." "My parents live 15 minutes away," I murmured, like that fact still meant something. On the line, my father sighed, a performance heavy with put-upon dignity. "Rowan, you chose to live like this. You chose that house in Capitol Hill. You chose 2 children at once. You chose to be independent." He didn't say the word he meant. Widowed. As if Dylan had been a choice I had made that July afternoon when a scaffolding gave way on I-5 and the world neatly split into before and after. My hands went cold. "I did not choose for Dylan to die," I said, and the room bent around the sentence. "I did not choose to bleed." Silence. Somewhere in the hospital a machine pinged at a steady, indifferent tempo. Amaya gently tucked the blanket around my legs, the way Dylan used to when Seattle nights got wet and mean. Out of the corner of my eye I saw Lila peel a sticker from her boot and offer it to August, who pressed it carefully onto his makeshift tower. They were building even here. They always wanted to build. "Rowan." My mother's voice softened into the version she used for church committees and fundraiser galas. "We're retired. We finally have a life. You promised." My breath hitched. I knew exactly what was coming. "You promised to help until Weston finished grad school," my father finished. "And you have. You've been wonderful. But you can't yank the rug now every time you spiral." There was the family diagnosis. The label they'd pinned on me since high school when I cried at the dinner table because no one had come to my art show. Spiral. The word that let them step over me neatly as they exited to their plans. I looked at Amaya. She looked back at me like she could see the weight I'd strapped to my own shoulders. "How soon?" I asked her. "If I sign the consents? We're getting in already." Her gaze flicked to the 4-pump. "If it's what Dr. Alvarez suspects, we don't want to wait." On the phone, my father cleared his throat. Decision time, his favorite game. "We'll stop by after the concert," he said. "If you're still, in there." After. The word snapped like ice. It could be hours. It could be. He cut in. We can't just cancel, Rowan. We'd lose the tickets. Your mother's been looking forward to this. Weston's flying in next week. We'll all go to brunch. My body became a funnel for heat and cold, shame and rage, and something so much older than both. It was the familiar choreography. I reach out. They recoil. I apologize for needing anything. Okay, I said, not trusting my voice to hold everything else. Good girl, my mother soothed, already half gone. We'll text if parking is. I ended the call. My thumb hovered over the home screen, over the old banking app with its neat scheduled payments, its quiet, automatic obedience. The next transfer to Martin and Corinne Vale. $2,400 first of the month. Waiting like a loyal dog. After Dylan died, I had still paid it because they had a refinance, because Weston was between fellowships, because I'd always been the steady one. My chest thrummed. I could hear Dylan, not with my ears but with that secret inward place where his voice still lived. You don't have to break yourself to keep them comfortable, Ro. I'm sorry, I told Amaya, though I wasn't sure to whom the apology was addressed. I need a second. She nodded, gaze kind. I'll be right outside. Do you want me to see if social work can reach someone fast? Please, I said. Anyone. I'll pay. When the curtain swished shut, I snapped a picture of my twins with my mental camera. August's stubborn lower lip, Lila's careful hands. I thought of the mornings Dylan would line bananas on the counter and announce with fake TV host drama, now featuring the world-famous Whitaker Waffle Bar. My throat burned. I opened messages and typed fast before I could talk myself out of it. Need bank. Cancel all recurring transfers to Martin and Corinne Vale effective immediately. Confirm by text. My thumb hovered above send. A tiny, treacherous voice cleared its throat in the back of my mind, the one that spoke in my mother's cadence. They'll be furious. They'll tell everyone you're unstable. They'll say you promised. I pressed send anyway. The message whooshed away, a sound so small it shouldn't have rearranged the entire map of my life. Mommy. Lila's voice, soft. She had toddled to my bedside, holding out a sticker shaped like a star. For brave. It speared me, this little mercy. For brave, I echoed, letting her stick it to the back of my hand. A buzz. The bank's automated reply. Confirmed. Recurring transfers cancelled. Another buzz right on its heels. My mother. Did you just cancel our payment? Is this because of tonight? That is deeply unfair. Then my father. We'll discuss when you've calmed down. Don't do anything drastic. Then Weston. Mom says you're pulling a stunt? I have finals. Don't drag me in. I stared at the thread, at the chorus I could have guessed word for word. Somewhere, a memory rose. The year Weston crashed my car and my parents made me apologize for creating a climate of stress. Me washing dishes in their kitchen, listening to the sound of my own heartbeat in my ears. Me promising to be easier, smaller, lighter. A rustle at the curtain. Amaya again, with a woman in her late 30s wearing a slate cardigan and the kind of tired that doesn't come off with sleep. Warm brown eyes, braid falling over one shoulder. He smiled at my kids first, then at me. This is Priya Menon, Amaya said. She's on our emergency sitter list. Used to run the child life program at Swedish. She lives 3 blocks away. She can stay with August and Lila through the night. Hi, little ones, Priya said gently, kneeling to their level. I'm a friend. I brought dinosaur stickers. Is that okay? August glanced at me, then nodded, cautious sovereignty in his eyes. Lila pivoted instantly. I want a stegosaurus, she declared, hopeful as sunrise. Something inside me unclenched a fraction. Priya, I said, and my voice broke. Thank you. I've got you, she said, like it was simple. Like it had always been available. This kind of help that didn't come with an invoice for my soul. My phone buzzed again. Mom, Rowan. You are overreacting. We depend on that money. We have obligations. Then a second later, as if she couldn't help herself. And really, Yo-Yo Ma, Rowan. It's not like it's some bar band. I put the phone face down. If I looked any longer, the old script would pull me into its current and I was done drowning. Amaya slid a clipboard onto the side tray. Consents, she said softly. Laparoscopy if needed. We'll aim to be as minimally invasive as possible. Dr. Alvarez will come in to explain. Is it bad? I asked. I meant, is it as bad as I feel? I meant, if this is the last thing my children see of me, is it me begging my parents for crumbs? Amaya's hand warm around mine, the star sticker crinkling between our skin. It's serious. And we're moving. You're not alone. Not alone. It should have sounded like comfort. Sounded like a dare. A text pinged again, shorter this time. Dad, don't you dare embarrass us in front of the family. We'll talk when you're reasonable. My laughter came out raw and startled, a sound I didn't recognize at first as my own. Don't you dare. The words that had bookended my childhood, my marriage, my widowhood. Don't you dare make a scene. Don't you dare ask for more. Don't you dare. Rowan. Priya had August by the hand now. Lila, newly loyal to Stegosaurus, clung to her cardigan. Want me to take them to the family room? There's a play corner. We can make a fort out of chairs and hospital blankets. I nodded, my throat too thick. Tell them I'll be right behind you soon, I said, even though soon meant something elastic now, stretchy enough to cover an operating room and maybe hours of not knowing. Priya grinned at the twins. Operation Blanket Fort is a go. They disappeared through the curtain in a shuffle of tiny boots and whispered negotiations about dinosaurs. Amaya stayed. The room felt bigger without their small selves, emptier at the edges, like a theater after the audience has left and all that's left are programs and echoes. Rowan, Amaya said, lowering her voice. Can I say something that isn't strictly medical? I met her eyes. Please. People will tell you you're cruel for choosing yourself, she said. They'll confuse boundaries with punishment. Especially the people who benefited from you having none. It was so precise it almost made me laugh again. Are you secretly a therapist? I asked. Oldest of 5, she said wry. Plus, I've worked enough New Year's Eves to know what scrapes us open and what stitches us back. A blur at the doorway. Dr. Alvarez, brisk, kind, with the quick hands of someone who respects time when it matters most. Ms. Whitaker. He nodded at my chart at me. We have an OR. It looks like a ruptured ovarian cyst with hemoperitoneum. We'll go in laparoscopic, stop the bleeding, and you'll wake up feeling like you fought a raccoon in a closet. Great, I said, strangled. I've always wanted that on a t-shirt. His smile was brief and real. Questions before we roll? 1,000. Only one that I could make space for. If something goes wrong. It won't, he said, even though we both knew he couldn't promise that. But if it did, we have protocols. And you have your people. My people. I thought of Dylan's laugh, of the way he'd scrape his boots on our porch and bring in the rain with him. I thought of August's steady hands and Lila's loud heart. I thought of a woman I had been raised to apologize for, the one who had just pressed a red send like she believed she deserved air. I signed the consents. As Amaya unlocked the wheels on my bed, my phone buzzed one last time. I didn't want to look. I looked anyway. Unknown number. Rowan, it's Aunt Sal. Your dad blasted the family group. Are you okay? Call me. And for what it's worth, good for you. My throat closed and opened around something like oxygen. Amaya caught my glance. Good news. Maybe, I said. Maybe the first good news. The doors to the hallway swung wide and the world cooled around the edges. Stainless steel. Soft shoes. A ceiling that moved above me like a strip of sky. As we rolled, I caught a flash of the family room. Priya crouched with August and Lila under a nest of blankets, 3 heads close together, their little faces lit with the serious joy of building. We passed them and I raised my hand. Lila waved back, fierce and tiny. August saluted with a tongue depressor. Mommy will be back, I mouthed. And just before the double doors swallowed us, my phone buzzed again against the mattress rail, insistently like a pulse. I reached for it with the hand that wasn't needled and tapped the screen. Mom, we're leaving now. If you insist on making a scene tonight, don't expect us to fix it tomorrow. Amaya's eyes flicked to the text, then to me. You ready? She asked, meaning something bigger than this room, this hour, this incision. I took a breath that started in my lungs and ended somewhere I couldn't name. Yes, I said. The door side closed behind us. I didn't always picture myself here, lying in a hospital gown, clutching my children's future in one hand and my parents' rejection in the other. If you had told the younger version of me that this is how my family would treat me, maybe I wouldn't have believed you. But deep down I think I always knew. My name is Rowan Whitaker and I was born into a family where love was conditional and conditions were endless. From the outside, the Vallas, my parents Martin and Corinne, looked like the portrait of a respectable Seattle couple. My father worked as a mid-level city planner before retiring early, My mother ran charity luncheons that always made the society pages. Their favorite child, my younger brother Weston, was the prodigy. A pianist with a scholarship to Juilliard, a resume padded with competitions and a magnetic charm that made people lean in when he spoke. Then there was me, the firstborn. The daughter who got good grades, graduated with honors in design, paid her bills on time, and quietly became the scaffolding on which everyone else leaned. If Weston stumbled, my parents threw him a cushion. If I stumbled, they told me to stop tripping. I remember the night of my college graduation, the night I received a departmental award for my design portfolio. I called them, voice shaking with pride, asking if they were coming. My mother's answer? "Oh, Rowan, Weston has a recital that same night at Benaroya. We can't be in two places at once. You'll understand." I told myself I did. I always told myself I did. When I married Dylan, my parents were polite but distant. They thought he was beneath me, a construction engineer who worked with his hands instead of curating a glossy resume. But Dylan was the one person who saw me fully. He used to say, "We'll build our own family, Ro. The kind that doesn't keep score." And for a while we did. Until that July afternoon when a piece of scaffolding snapped on the I-5 job site and Dylan's name became one more casualty in a local news report. Suddenly I was 34, widowed with 2 toddlers and a mortgage that felt like a mountain. That was the first time I asked my parents for help. Not emotional support, not babysitting, not even a meal. Just a loan to tide us over while insurance processed. Instead of sympathy, I got a spreadsheet. My father's voice clipped. "We can't just give you money, Rowan. But since you're working anyway, perhaps you could help us. Your mother and I are trying to refinance the house." And just like that, the roles reversed. Every month, $2,400 left my account and entered theirs. At first, I rationalized it. They'd helped Weston for years, so maybe this was balance. But then it never stopped. Month after month. Even after Dylan's funeral. Even after I went back to freelancing just to keep my own lights on. They never missed an opportunity to remind me how much they depended on me. "We planned our retirement around your commitment," my mother would say, swirling wine in her glass. My father would add, "Don't you dare leave us in the lurch, Rowan. We've sacrificed too much." Sacrificed. Meanwhile, I missed birthdays, playdates, and hours of sleep trying to juggle contracts. My twins grew up in the quiet shadow of a mother who was always racing deadlines. But I kept paying because guilt is an inheritance you can't decline without tearing the family tree from its roots. By the time I was sitting in that ER with pain carving me open from the inside, my parents' pattern was already decades old. Weston was still the golden boy, finishing grad school in New York, posting glossy photos from rooftop parties, while my parents bragged about him to anyone who'd listen. Me. I was the wallet, the fallback, the voice they muted whenever my needs interfered with their comfort. That night in the hospital, I realized something terrifying. If I didn't survive surgery, my children would be left in the hands of people who saw them as burdens. The thought shook me more than the diagnosis itself. And yet, even as my father's voice still rang in my ears, "Don't you dare embarrass us in front of the family," a strange resolve was blooming inside me. For the first time in my life, I was starting to believe that maybe I wasn't the problem. Maybe the problem was a family who only knew how to take. The gurney wheels squeaked as Amaya pushed me toward the operating suite. I clutched the edge of the blanket like it could tether me to the life I was leaving behind in that bay. The juice boxes, the crayons, the 2 small people who were everything I had left. Before we reached the double doors, I whispered, "One more thing. My phone." Amaya slipped it into my hand. The star sticker Lila had pressed onto my skin crinkled under the glow of fluorescent lights. I pulled up my banking app, stared at the automatic transfer queued for the end of the week. $2,400. The number glared at me, steady as a metronome. I canceled it. Then, with trembling hands, I drafted a message to my parents. "Me Mom and Dad. I will no longer be providing financial support. My children and I deserve better than being an afterthought. Please do not contact me again." I hit send. My chest heaved like I had just broken the surface of icy water. Fear. Relief. Freedom. As they rolled me through the doors, the phone buzzed in a frenzy. Texts, calls, a flood of notifications. I didn't look. Not then. The surgery was harder than expected. I woke groggy, the world muffled, pain gnawing at my abdomen but dulled by medication. For 3 days I drifted in and out of sleep while the twins stayed nearby with Priya. who colored with them on hospital trays and told them bedtime stories in a voice that made even the night monitors soften. When I was awake, I scrolled through the messages I had avoided. 27 missed calls. Dozens of texts. The progression was predictable. Confusion. What is going on? Did you mess with the bank? Bigger. This is outrageous, Rowan. We counted on you. How dare you do this right before the holidays? Desperation. We can't cover the mortgage without you. If you don't restart the transfer, we'll lose the house. And then the cruelest. You're being selfish. Do you want your children to end up homeless when we can't take them in? Not once did they ask how the surgery had gone. Not once did they ask if their grandchildren had eaten, if I was awake, if I was alive. Instead they mentioned a cruise. Non-refundable tickets. My father's voice echoed in the texts, smug and rehearsed. You can't just cut us off like this. We have plans. I stared at the phone until the words blurred. The room felt too bright, too loud. My body ached, but not as much as the hollow pit inside me. Then a new vibration. A different name. Weston. Mom and Dad told me you had some minor checkup, and are blowing things out of proportion. What's really happening? My thumb hovered. Part of me wanted to throw the phone across the room. Part of me wanted to scream. Instead, I typed back through a haze of painkillers and anger. Me, Weston. I had emergency surgery. Internal bleeding. They refused to watch the kids because of a concert. I almost didn't make it. The reply came quickly, almost frantic. Weston. Wait, what? I had no idea. I thought you were just exaggerating. I'm sorry, Ro. I stared at the words. Weston, the golden child, apologizing. For a moment, I didn't know what to do with that. By the time I was discharged, I had made decisions I never thought myself capable of. I hired Priya part-time even though money was tight. I called a lawyer to draft a will naming someone other than my parents as guardian if anything happened to me. I blocked my parents' numbers. Weston's I left open, hesitant, cautious. The financial fear gnawed at me, but so did something else. For the first time, I wasn't sending money to people who only took. For the first time, my paychecks were mine, and my children's. But the peace didn't last long. 3 nights after I got home, someone knocked on my apartment door. Hard. Insistent. Through the peephole, my parents. My mother's expensive scarf, my father's folded arms, faces like carved stone. My stomach knotted. When I opened the door just a crack, my father leaned forward, voice sharp. We need to talk about this ridiculous financial stunt. My mother's tone dripped with sweetness. Darling, you're making a scene. We just want to know you and the children are all right. Their words were polished, rehearsed. But their eyes? They were here for the money. Always the money. I gripped the doorframe, my body still weak, but my voice steadier than I expected. We're fine. And I meant what I said. I'm done. My father's jaw tightened. We adjusted our lifestyle to your support. You can't just yank it away. My voice rose, trembling but clear. You chose Elton John tickets over your grandchildren's safety. You chose concerts over my life. Silence. Heavy. Then my mother, in a whisper, Are you really going to punish us like this? I met her gaze, a strange calm settling over me. This isn't punishment. This is consequence. I closed the door. And for the first time in 36 years it stayed closed. The first day home felt like a truce signed on a napkin. Fragile, easily torn. Priya arrived early with coffee and a bag of blueberries for the twins. I shuffled between the couch and the kitchen island, moving carefully, learning this new body that twinged if I breathed too deep. For a few blessed hours, the only sounds were wooden blocks clicking together and Lila explaining dinosaur taxonomy with full toddler authority. Then the buzzing started. Unknown numbers. Voicemails that stacked like dishes in a sink. I had blocked my parents, but they were nothing if not resourceful. A flood of messages poured in from people I hadn't heard from since my wedding. Great aunts, second cousins, my mother's best friend from her charity board. The gist was identical, uncanny in its coordination. Rowan, sweetie, your mother is beside herself. This isn't like you. Honey, your father says you're going through something. Let them help. It's the holidays. Don't be cruel. Cruel. I stared at that word until it went blurry. Want me to screen for you? Priya asked gently, already wiping peanut butter from August's cheeks. Please, I said, too tired to pretend I wasn't relieved. She set my phone to do not disturb and programmed a whitelist. Her number, Weston's, the hospital, my lawyer. The silence felt like stepping into shade after an hour in direct sun. It lasted 15 minutes. A knock at the door, precisely the way my father knocks. Authoritative, a tempo that says I belong in this space. My stomach clenched. Through the peephole, my parents again, and with them Aunt Patrice. My mother's sister. The designated peacemaker. The one who sends mass texts about family brunches and thinks boundaries are what keep neighbors from borrowing sugar. I didn't open the door. Rowan, Aunt Patrice called, voice pitched to soothing. Honey, it's Aunt Pat. Let's talk like civilized people. We are civil, I said through the door. From my side of the door. Don't be childish, my father snapped, the word a whip. You will open this door and you will explain yourself. I pressed my forehead to the cool wood, measuring breaths. I told you when I'm ready to talk I'll reach out. Right now I'm recovering from surgery. You're making a scene, my mother said, which in our family means you're refusing to follow the script. Patrice tried again. Sweetheart, your parents are struggling. They didn't realize you'd cut them off. That's a shock. I didn't realize they'd refuse to watch their grandchildren so I could survive an operation, I said. Also a shock. Silence. Then the soft click of my mother's expensive heel pivoting on the hallway carpet. We'll be back, she said. With solutions. It should have sounded reassuring. Felt like a threat. They left. I slid to the floor and sat there until Priya quietly lowered herself beside me and leaned her shoulder into mine. You're doing the hard thing, she said, not offering platitudes, not trying to tidy the mess. That afternoon the family group email landed like a grenade. From Martin Vale. Subject: concerning Rowan's recent behavior. It was a masterpiece of omission. My father described my sudden decision to stop helping them, despite everything we have sacrificed. He framed me as unstable and hostile, claimed I had banned them from seeing the twins without provocation. He mentioned medical drama, but in the passive voice like a vague weather report. There was an episode. We were on our way to check on her after a previously scheduled engagement. Previously scheduled engagement. He CC'd everyone with a pulse and a connection to our last name. He did not mention Yo-Yo Ma. He did not mention the words internal bleeding. He did not mention that the engagement outweighed my life. I stood over the kitchen counter, reading, my hands cold. Within minutes, replies began to thread below his manifesto. Great Aunt Lydia. Oh dear. Ron, what happened? We love you. Cousin Jamie. Tacoma, wait. Didn't you guys just take delivery of the new Tesla? Uncle Daryl. Martin, are you sure email is the right venue? Then the first crack. Cousin Mara Ballard. Uncle Martin, last month at Thanksgiving, you told everyone about the Maui timeshare you upgraded to. And the wine club. And the emergency yacht weekend for your anniversary. I'm confused. How are you struggling? I almost dropped my phone. My father, replying, all this is not appropriate to discuss. Please support us, not question us. Rowan has put us in an impossible position. My finger hovered over reply all. I could feel the heat in my chest, the words like steam ready to scald. Priya's hand covered mine gently and pushed the phone back an inch. Factual. Brief, she murmured. Your story, not a war. He was right. If I poured a lifetime of hurt into that thread, they'd call me hysterical. If I told the truth simply, it would land where it needed to. I typed slowly. From Rowan Whitaker. Subject: concerning Rowan's recent behavior. I recently underwent emergency surgery for internal bleeding. I asked my parents to watch my 3-year-old twins so I could go to the operating room. They declined because they had concert tickets. I am focusing on recovery and my children. I won't be discussing this further. I read it twice. 3 times. It looked too thin to hold the weight of the last decade. It looked perfect. I hit send. The replies split into camps. The we didn't know camp. And Sal. Rowan, I'm so sorry. No one told us it was emergency surgery. Do you need anything? Cousin Michael, I can drive up tomorrow with casseroles. Seriously. The how dare you camp. Great Uncle Pete, you don't air family laundry in public. My mother. Privately, how could you humiliate us like this? And then a thread that made me sit down hard. Cousin Theo Kirkland. Martin, with respect, last week you asked me to invest in your friend's crypto restaurant idea. Didn't you say you were flush? This isn't adding up. I blinked. The room sharpened. For the first time, it wasn't just my voice naming the pattern. Other people had been hearing it too, they just needed permission to label it. My phone buzzed again. Listen, Weston. I didn't know it was like this. Mom told me you were having a moment. I should have called you, not them. I'm sorry. Are you okay? Do you need me to fly out? I stared at those words until they burned. When we were kids, I used to wake him from nightmares and tell him ghost stories with happy endings. I used to think my usefulness was the only thing that kept me in the room. Me, Weston. Okay. Priya's with the kids. I need you to ask yourself why they didn't tell you the truth. That's the work. Not flying out and patching a hole. He left me on read for a long minute. Then, Weston. You're right. I set the phone down and realized my hands were shaking. Priya slid a glass of water toward me. You okay? I think so, I said, surprising myself. I thought telling the truth would make everything explode. But it's like the explosion was already happening. I just turned on the lights. He smiled, tired and proud. That's how rot works. It hates daylight. 2 hours later, the group email pinged again. This time it was Aunt Patrice. Patrice. Let's all calm down. Rowan is being dramatic, but she's also just had a procedure. Martin and Corinne, maybe apologize for the misunderstanding about the concert? My jaw dropped. Misunderstanding. As if the refusal had been a poor choice of words, not a choice at all. Before I could reply, Aunt Sal jumped back in. Aunt Sal. Patrice, no. This isn't a misunderstanding. Corinne told me on the phone verbatim, we're not wasting box seats because Rowan has a stomachache. That was her phrase. Stomachache. My heart thudded. Stomachache. The exact cruelty of it wrapped in domestic language. My mother's reply came fast, furious, saccharine edges stripped away. Corinne. Sal, you weren't there. You always coddle Rowan. You all do. She has been unreasonable for years. We have carried her burdens long enough. She promised to help us after we sacrificed for her education. We planned our retirement around that commitment. How dare she humiliate us like this? I read it and felt something snap. Not a break. A release. There it was in black and white. Not love, not concern. Entitlement. My mother believed my adult life existed to pay for her comfort, and the refusal to do so was a moral failure. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The threat had become its own evidence. By evening, my apartment smelled like roasted garlic and thyme. Mara texted, left lasagna on your porch. Ringing and running so you don't have to chat. I laughed for the first time in days. Cousin Jamie offered to Venmo money for diapers. A neighbor I barely knew slipped a card under my door that read in looping script, we're in 4B. Knock if you need anything between 6 to 9 p.m. Quiet hours are our specialty. When the twins went down, the apartment sank into a quiet that felt almost luxurious. I sat on the edge of my bed and watched the moon light the scratches on our hardwood floor. The ones Dylan and I had made moving the couch for the first time, the ones we'd always meant to sand and never did. My phone buzzed one more time. A new number. The message was short. Unknown. Your dad just called my husband asking for a bridge loan. He told him you'd gone rogue. Thought you should know. Dana from church. I stared at the text, then set the phone face down. Of course he did. When one well ran dry, my father always knew where to find another. The next morning brought two things. A letter from my parents' mortgage servicer addressed to them but misdelivered to my box. Same building, same last name, thank you ancient mail slots. And an email from my father to the group thread with the subject line urgent. Family meeting. I stood in the lobby with the envelope in my hands, my name and theirs side by side in the mailman's cramped print. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. The urgency in my father's subject line told me enough. Upstairs, I found Priya on the floor with August and Lila, their blanket fort upgraded into a small city with streets made of masking tape. The dinosaurs have a bus line now, August reported solemnly. It runs on time. Of course it does, I said and kissed the tops of their heads. Bad news? Priya asked quietly when the kids were absorbed again. Maybe, I said. But not mine this time. She waited. I didn't elaborate. Not yet. Because before I could tell her about the envelope or the subject line or the way my parents were about to discover what real consequences looked like, the intercom buzzed. 3 short beeps, then my father's voice, flattened into static by old wiring. Rowan, he said. Let us up. We're here to fix this. He paused, then added the line that had governed my life like a law carved in stone. Don't make us do this the hard way. I pressed the button, listened to the click, felt the old fear press against my ribs. Then I turned away from the intercom, walked back to my children and their dinosaur bus line, and for the first time in forever, I didn't rush to open a door just because someone demanded it. I had no idea what the hard way would look like. I only knew this: I was done making their problems my emergency. And somewhere down the hall an elevator dinged. The elevator's gears groaned as it climbed. I sat on the floor with August and Lila inside our blanket fort, pretending I couldn't hear the heavy thud of footsteps in the hall. My children's giggles rose and fell like a tide, and for once, I let myself sink into that sound instead of the panic pounding in my chest. The knock came, sharp, insistent. My father's knock. I didn't move. Rowan. His voice boomed through the door, low enough that the whole hallway could hear. This is absurd. Open up. Lila froze mid-laugh, her stuffed stegosaurus clutched in her hand. Is that Grandpa? She whispered. My throat tightened. It's just noise, sweetheart, I murmured, pulling her close. Then my mother's voice, sugary, trembling in the way she used when she wanted sympathy. Darling, we're worried about you. You haven't answered our calls. We just want to make sure you and the children are all right. Their performance was flawless, the tone rehearsed from years of social committees and charity luncheons. But I'd seen what lay beneath. Concern wasn't why they were here. I stood, walked to the door and opened it just enough to look them in the eyes. We're fine, I said evenly. You should leave. My father pushed against the door just slightly, testing my strength. Not until we discuss this nonsense. The bank called about our mortgage. We had to dip into Crew's savings to cover the payment. That's not sustainable. Crew's savings. For a moment I almost laughed. Here I was, still sore from incisions that stitched me back together, and my father was angry he had to touch his vacation fund. I told you, I said, forcing calm into my voice. I'm done sending money. My mother's eyes widened with practiced hurt. Rowan, please. We've come to depend on that support. Your father and I built our retirement around your commitment. My commitment? My voice cracked, then steadied. I've been supporting you out of guilt while you refused to help your own grandchildren during my surgery. You couldn't miss one concert. My father's face darkened. That's not fair. I took a breath so deep it stung. Fair would have been you showing up when I needed you. Fair would have been putting your grandchildren before an evening of cellos and champagne. You didn't. For once they had no script. Silence stretched. Then my mother whispered, her voice brittle, we made one mistake. Are you really going to punish us like this? I shook my head. This isn't punishment. This is consequence. The words landed heavy in the air between us. My father blinked, and for the first time I saw something almost like fear flicker across his face. Behind me, a small voice. Mommy? Lila peeked around my legs, clutching her dinosaur. My mother's expression snapped instantly into something bright and desperate. There's my precious grandbaby, she cooed, crouching as if she could bridge years of absence in a single smile. Grandma brought presents. But Lila didn't run into her arms. She backed away, eyes darting to me for reassurance. She didn't know these people. Not really. I think you should leave, I said softly, closing the door before their expressions could twist into rage. The silence that followed was heavy, punctuated by the slow retreat of footsteps down the hall. They didn't stop there. The next morning they returned with reinforcements. Aunt Patrice again, the eternal peacemaker, her voice syrupy through the door. Rowan, honey, be reasonable. Your parents are struggling. They need you. They managed before I started sending money. I called back, my hands trembling. They can manage again. They chose early retirement knowing their savings weren't enough. That was their choice. From behind Patrice, my mother's voice cracked. We made those decisions because you promised to help us. We've already canceled our cruise. Now we might lose the house. The manipulation was so transparent now it almost felt insulting. Once I would have folded. Once I would have believed I owed them my life. But standing there in my pajamas with fresh scars tugging at my abdomen, I realized something powerful. I didn't owe them anything. Mom. Dad, I said firmly, I'm recovering from major surgery. I'm raising 2 toddlers alone. This conversation is over. I walked away from the door and didn't return no matter how long they knocked. That evening a new blow landed. A group email from my father, blasted to the entire extended family. Subject: abandoned in our time of need. He painted me as ungrateful. A daughter who had cut them off without reason after all they'd sacrificed. He spoke of my unstable behavior, of my cruelty. He carefully omitted one detail: that they had chosen concert tickets over their daughter's life. The replies rolled in, a storm of confusion and half-truths. Some sided with them, clucking sympathy. Others asked questions they weren't prepared to answer. But one reply stood out. My cousin Michael, blunt as ever. Uncle Martin, didn't you just buy a boat last month? And Aunt Corinne, wasn't that a new diamond bracelet you showed off at Thanksgiving? The silence that followed was louder than any defense. For the first time, I wasn't the one on trial. That night, as I tucked August and Lila into bed, August looked at me with sleepy eyes and asked, "Are we safe, Mommy?" My heart cracked. I smoothed his hair, kissed his forehead. "We're safe," I whispered, more certain than I felt. Because for the first time I had drawn a line, and I wasn't stepping back over it. The morning after the family email war, my phone blinked with a message from Weston. "Weston, Dad's freaking out. He says you ruined them. What's going on?" I almost deleted it without answering. But then I remembered the bewilderment in his voice when he first learned the truth about my surgery. He wasn't innocent, he'd basked in years of being the favorite, but he also hadn't been told everything. Me, Weston. They refused to help when I went into emergency surgery. I cut off the monthly transfers. That's it. The rest is on them. His reply came slowly. "Weston. They told me it was just a routine checkup. They said you were being dramatic. I had no idea." That was the first crack. The second came a week later when Jessica from the mortgage company, a friend of my cousin, mentioned something offhand at a family dinner. Word traveled fast. My parents had been months behind on payments. The only reason the bank hadn't moved sooner was because of my monthly deposits. Suddenly their desperation made sense. But it wasn't just the mortgage. Jessica told me quietly, almost apologetic. "Rowan, they took out a second loan on the house last year. Something about a boat? And a timeshare in Maui." A boat. A timeshare. Luxuries stacked on luxuries, financed by my guilt. The revelation spread like wildfire through the family grapevine. By the next weekend, even Aunt Patrice's patience had worn thin. "Corinne," she told my mother in a reply all that practically shook with indignation, "you told me Rowan abandoned you. You never mentioned the boat or the timeshare. You never mentioned she was paying your mortgage. I defended you and you lied to me." My mother's response came fast, brittle, defensive. "We deserved those things. Rowan promised. She owes us." And just like that, the curtain fell. The mask slipped. The fallout was swift. Cousin Michael stopped by my apartment one night with his wife, both carrying covered dishes. "We read the whole thread," he said, setting the casserole down with a thud. "They're digging their own grave. Don't you dare blame yourself." Others reached out too. Texts from cousins I barely knew. A card from an aunt in Spokane. Even my neighbor down the hall, who had overheard one of my parents' hallway tirades, slipped a post-it note under my door. "Proud of you for standing up to them. Not easy. For B. But my parents. They doubled down. They left voicemails that swung wildly from rage to pleading. "You can't do this to us, Rowan. We raised you. Your children will hate you if you keep them from their grandparents. We're going to lose the house. Do you want that on your conscience?" Each message was like déjà vu, the same script they'd used on me my entire life. Only now the family was watching and their audience wasn't clapping. 2 weeks later, Weston called. His voice was tight, unsteady. "They want me to move back home and cover the mortgage," he said. "They gave me a spreadsheet. Oh, it's a disaster. They've been overspending for years. The boat. Bought on credit. The timeshare. Maxed out a line of equity. They were counting on you indefinitely." "Indefinitely," I repeated, the word sour in my mouth. He sighed. "I thought they helped you too. I didn't know it was one-sided." "They never helped me," I said quietly. "They only took." On the other end of the line, Weston was silent. Then softly, "I think you're right." The collapse came faster than I expected. Within a month, a foreclosure notice was taped to their front door. The house, the 4-bedroom lakefront showpiece where I'd spent my childhood being compared to Weston's brilliance, was slipping away. My mother called me 3 times that day, sobbing into the voicemail. "They're taking everything, Rowan. Please, just one more transfer. Please." I didn't answer. 2 weeks later, Jessica, the mortgage officer cousin, texted me. They sold the boat at a huge loss. The timeshare too. They're moving into a condo. Smaller place. Less flashy. Dad's working part-time at a hardware store. It should have satisfied me. Justice, karma, whatever you wanted to call it. For years they had lived off me while treating me like a burden. Now the safety net was gone and the fall was theirs alone. But when I looked at August and Lila sleeping side by side, their hands curled around each other's even in dreams, I didn't feel triumph. I felt distance. Like their downfall wasn't even about me anymore. Because my story wasn't theirs to script anymore. And yet, even as I rebuilt piece by piece, casseroles from cousins, Priya's steady presence, work slowly resuming, my parents' voices still haunted me. Not in person, not even through blocked numbers, but in the echoes of old phrases burned into me. Don't you dare embarrass us. Don't you dare walk away. Don't you dare forget what you owe. But here I was. Forgetting. Walking. Choosing something else. And for the first time I realized, maybe that was the real punishment. Not for them. For the ghosts of them I carried. The first morning I woke without the hospital's chemical fog in my veins. The apartment sounded different. Like it had been holding its breath and finally exhaled. Rain tapped the window in that soft Seattle way, and somewhere down on the street a bus sighed to a stop. Priya let herself in with the spare key and set coffee on the counter, the smell threading through the rooms like a promise. We built a new routine out of small, deliberate choices. Do not disturb stayed on except for a short list of names. Priya the pediatrician, my lawyer Weston. I deleted the family thread from my home screen. I stopped explaining my boundaries to people who were invested in not understanding them. The body follows the mind's courage on a delay. My incisions tugged when I laughed, so I laughed carefully at first. We walked slowly to California Anderson Park and back, the twins in rain boots, stomping through reflective puddles that turned the world upside down. I learned to stand up without bracing my hand on the kitchen island. I learned how much rest it takes to feel like a person again. On our first afternoon at home alone, the mail included a manila envelope from Anika Shore, the estate attorney I'd called from my hospital bed. I signed the last pages at the kitchen table while Priya cut apples into moons and the twins turned a cardboard box into a rocket. The documents were precise where my life had felt messy. A will, a durable power of attorney, a letter of intent for the twins. Aunt Sal, steady, unpretentious, the only adult who had reached for me without conditions, was named as their guardian. Priya read the papers and nodded when I asked if she'd serve as the interim caregiver, the bridge between something happens and Sal getting to Seattle. "I'm honored," she said, and the weight in my chest shifted. There is a kind of peace in naming who you trust. Work trickled back in with a tenderness I didn't expect. 2 clients emailed, "Take the time you need," without a hint of resentment. One of them, Harper, a florist who paid me in peonies when cash was thin, asked if I could design a simple memorial page for her aunt who'd passed. I said yes because the request felt like a hand reached across a gap. When I sent the link, Harper wrote back, "I cried in a good way." She overpaid the invoice and refused a refund. "Consider it a tithe to the gods of getting back up," she said. That night I opened a blank document and typed Aster and Ash at the top. A small studio for memory sites, simple and beautiful, the kind people could navigate even with grief-fogged brains. I made a 1-page website for my one-person business and a checklist that included things I used to ignore. Rest times, snack breaks, go outside once. It felt absurd to calendar air and fruit-like appointments, but I had spent years scheduling myself out of existence. A little absurdity seemed wise. Priya found a cooperative preschool 2 neighborhoods over that still had a rare mid-year opening. The tuition made my stomach flutter, but the deposit was less than a single emergency transfer to my parents had been. I clicked pay and felt something old and tight loosen, like a knot finally persuaded to release. The community that had startled me awake after the family email kept showing up in small, bright ways. Mara returned with soup and a box of hand-me-down coats. The neighbor in 4B, her name turned out to be Tess, slid a list of kid-friendly parks under my door with a sticky note that read, "We swear by story time at the library. Also, we own a mini trampoline. Open invitation." The PTA mom I'd always avoided in the hallway because she reminded me of my mother introduced herself as Kamala, not scary at all, a nurse at Harborview who'd done her share of New Year's shifts. If you ever need stitches removed, she joked, I accept payment in banana bread. I joined a Zoom for young widowed parents on a Tuesday night, hair damp, twins half asleep on the couch behind me. The screen tiled with faces that looked like mine used to look, caved in and trying. The facilitator, Sable Monroe, had the calm of someone who has ferried a lot of people across a hard river. You don't have to be okay here, she said. You do have to be honest. I said it. Out loud. My husband died. My parents called it a spiral. 2 weeks ago I had emergency surgery. They chose a concert over watching my kids. I expected the silence that follows a confession. Instead the chat pinged with typing bubbles like flicked matches. Elodie. Mine skipped my daughter's birthday to go to Cabo. Marin. Funeral day my mother-in-law asked who would pay for the hors d'oeuvres. Nor, you're not crazy. You're breaking the cycle. After the meeting, Sable stayed on for a minute while I closed tabs and gathered stray crayons. One thing, she said. When people show you in writing what they believe you owe them, print it and put it in a folder. Not to hold a grudge, to remind yourself you weren't imagining it. I did. I labeled the folder receipts and slid it into the back of my desk. I slept better with the proof outside my head. Weston called a few evenings later, tentative the way someone approaches a dog they've learned not to startle. I found a therapist, he said, words tumbling. I started last week. I told her about the email. About the boat. About everything. She asked me when I first learned that love was a performance. I said probably when Mom bought me a toy piano because I cried when you got a sketchbook. The joke was so honest it hurt. How'd it go? I asked. Humbling, he said, and I heard something cracking in him too, the good kind. I'm sorry I didn't stand up sooner, Ro. I'm trying now. Trying counts, I said and meant it. The next afternoon the twins and I walked to the library for story time, and I ran into Marin Ellsworth, a woman from the widows group with a denim jacket covered in enamel pins and a laugh that made old ladies smile at her like she was their granddaughter. She was a real estate agent. Her wife had died 2 years earlier. We stood by the bulletin board decorated with construction paper snowflakes as she scribbled on the back of a flyer. Okay, she said, practical and kind. You're paying through the nose for Capitol Hill rent. If you can swing a down payment, even a small one, you could get into a little rambler in West Seattle or Burien. Yard, fence, washer-dryer that doesn't require a quarter hunt. Mortgage could be lower than rent. Interest rates aren't charming, but there are programs. I'll put you with Tariq Khan, lender. He's a magician with 1,099s if you show a steady year. It was fast, I admitted. The thought of packing boxes made my incisions ache in sympathy. It is and it isn't, she said. Sometimes safety isn't more time. Sometimes it's a door that locks and a patch of grass where your kids can fall without bleeding. We toured 3 houses that week with the twins in tow and Priya passing out raisins like communion. One smelled like old cigarettes and lost hope. One had a slanted backyard that would turn into a mud river by spring. But the third, small and square and stubborn, had a yellow front door and a maple tree that would throw shade over a kiddie pool come summer. In the living room, sunlight pooled on oak floors and I could see Dylan there just for a second, dropping his keys in a bowl and saying, "We can fix that trim on a Saturday." I stood in the tiny kitchen with Marin while August and Lila measured the world in heel-to-toe steps. You don't have to decide today, she said. Just know what it feels like to want something and call that feeling by its real name. Wanting had always felt dangerous in my family. Wanting made you ungrateful. Wanting invited punishment. Standing in that kitchen I realized wanting was also a compass. It didn't always point north, but it pointed away from harm. On the way home we stopped at an empty playground slick with rain, and the twins insisted on the slide anyway. I watched them climb, slip, laugh, try again. 2 strangers, women in fleece and leggings with coffee cups, smiled at us like we were a postcard of a life worth having. One of them asked where I got Lila's rain boots. Hand-me-downs, I said, and she laughed and said, the Pacific Northwest way. That night I built the draft of Aster and Ash, choosing fonts like I was choosing a temperature. Nothing too cold. Nothing too sugary. Strong lines, soft edges. I put pay what you can on a section of the page because grief doesn't respect budgets. By midnight 2 emails had come in through the new contact form. A firefighter's widow in Renton. A son in Boise who wanted to write his father's story before he forgot the good parts. I slept hard and woke to a Venmo ping from cousin Jamie. Diapers on me this week. Proud of you. The caption had a row of tiny fire emojis that made me grin into my coffee. Not everyone clapped. A postcard arrived with my mother's handwriting on the back, a watercolor rendering of a Tuscan hillside. We are trying to forgive you, she wrote. Don't make it harder than it needs to be. No return address. I held it over the recycling bin a long time before letting it go. There are some relics that don't belong in the receipts folder because they don't capture the truth. They only smear it. Recovery made my world smaller before it got bigger. We measured progress in domestic victories. Both twins napped at the same time. No one cried when the banana broke wrong. I cooked eggs without needing to lie down after. I sent invoices. I opened a savings account and renamed it Emergency, but for us. I deleted the banking template labeled Transfer to Parents and replaced it with Preschool Summer Fund. Sable texted me on a Wednesday. Circle at my place this weekend? In person, kids welcome. I'll put out crayons, you bring your messy. We spread blankets on her living room floor and watched our children build new alliances over Lego as we talked about the jobs we used to have, the ones we abdicated, the ones we were taking back. When I mentioned the yellow-doored house, the group did a collective gasp like I'd told them I'd found buried treasure. Do you know what security does to a nervous system? Sable asked. It lets you dream without bracing for the slap. On the bus home, August fell asleep on my shoulder, his breath warm and damp. Lila pressed her forehead against the fogged window and drew a heart in the condensation with the side of her hand. I watched it bloom and vanish with each stop and start. Back at the apartment, the hallway smelled like someone had attempted banana bread and scorched it. Tess from 4B was kneeling by her door with a toolbox, coaxing a loose hinge back into obedience. She looked up, took in the stroller, the damp hair, the paper bag of clementines hanging from the handle. You look lighter, she said. I think I am, I said. I think it's just that I'm not carrying things that aren't mine. Keep going, she said, then added like an omen disguised as casual friendliness. By the way, there's an envelope at your door. Fancy paper. I turned. A white rectangle leaned against the frame, heavy, embossed with my name in my mother's impeccable script. It wasn't a postcard. It wasn't a bill. It was the kind of stationery my mother used for condolences, for invitations, for declarations that sounded like truth because they were printed on thick stock. For a long heartbeat, I just looked at it. The twins wiggled out of the stroller, shedding jackets like molting birds, chattering about the bus driver who had given them each a high five. Open. Lila asked, pointing, because to a 3-year-old every envelope is a birthday card waiting to happen. Maybe after snack, I said, and tucked it into the bowl by the keys where Dylan used to rattle his coins and grin at me like we were in on the same joke. I washed clementines and laid them on a dish towel. August counted them with solemn ceremony. The apartment felt warmer, full in a way that had nothing to do with the thermostat. Only when the twins were down for their nap did I circle back to the bowl. I turned the envelope over in my hands. No return address. The flap sealed tight. On the front, under my name, my mother had written a single word in smaller script like a subtitle. Please. I slid my thumb under the flap and hesitated. All winter, I had learned to distinguish the sound of a boundary being tested from the sound of a life being offered. It's a small difference until it isn't. I took a breath that didn't hurt and began to read. The paper was thick, textured, the kind you only buy in boutique stationers where everything smells faintly of lavender and dust. My mother's handwriting stretched across the page, precise as ever, each loop and line betraying hours spent perfecting her script in Catholic school. Rowan, it began. I have had time to reflect. Watching you build a life without us has forced me to confront truths I spent decades ignoring. I was jealous of your resilience. I resented that you did not seem to need me the way I needed my own mother. When you reached out before your surgery, I told myself you were dramatic because that was easier than admitting you were desperate, and that I failed you. I stopped, staring at the ink as if the letters might rearrange themselves into the accusations I expected. But they didn't. Your father and I made choices out of selfishness. We lived as though your support was permanent, as though you owed us. We convinced ourselves that love was a transaction, that we could spend your loyalty like a credit card that never declined. We were wrong. The next line blurred as my throat closed. I am sorry. I don't ask for forgiveness. I only ask that you acknowledge I finally see what we've done. We have downsized to a condo. Your father is working part-time at a hardware store. We are learning humility late, but we are learning. If there is ever room in your heart for us to know our grandchildren, we will wait until you say so. It ended there. No demands. No guilt. Just ink drying on expensive paper. I folded the letter and placed it on the table. For a long time I didn't move. I listened to the hum of the fridge, the distant laughter of teenagers on the street, the soft creak of the buildings settling in the damp Seattle night. It didn't feel like triumph. It didn't feel like justice. It felt unfinished. When I showed Weston, his reaction was guarded. They've been talking about therapy, he admitted. Dad had a health scare last month. Scared him enough to listen, maybe. They're different. Or at least trying. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. My father, who once told me I was a burden, suddenly admitting to weakness. My mother, who had perfected the art of denial, writing the word sorry with her own hand. It was almost too much to believe. I don't know if I can trust it, I confessed. Don't, Weston said bluntly. Not yet. Trust actions. Not words. A year after my surgery, I agreed to meet them in person. Neutral ground. A cafe near the waterfront, public enough that no one could perform too loudly. When they arrived, I almost didn't recognize them. My father's posture had shrunk. His expensive jackets traded for a windbreaker from the hardware store. My mother's diamonds were gone, her scarf plain. They looked smaller. Not just physically. As though the air of superiority they'd carried for decades had deflated. We sat in silence at first. Then shockingly my father's eyes filled. I've been a terrible father, he whispered, voice breaking. And a worse grandfather. I don't expect forgiveness. I only want you to know I see it now. I was selfish. My mother reached across the table, not quite touching my hand. We've been in therapy. Family therapy. Weston pushed us. We fought it, but it's changing us. For the first time, they didn't make excuses. They didn't pivot to guilt. They didn't remind me of their sacrifices. They just sat there, stripped of the personas they had worn all my life. I shared photos of August and Lila, their faces smeared with peanut butter, their artwork taped proudly to the fridge. My parents listened. Not interrupting. Not correcting. Just listening. When we stood to leave, my father asked carefully, would it be possible, someday, to know our grandchildren? I thought of my twins, their laughter, the blanket forts, the way they reached for me with unshakable trust. I thought of the letter, the years of manipulation, the nights I cried on the kitchen floor sending money I couldn't spare. It depends, I said quietly. Not on your words. On your actions. If you respect me, if you keep doing the work, then maybe. But understand this. My children will only have relationships with people who respect their mother. My father nodded, tears brimming again. My mother whispered, we'll prove it. Walking out into the misty Seattle afternoon, I didn't feel the old crushing obligation. I didn't feel the molten anger either. I felt steady. For the first time in my life, I was not the daughter begging for love. I was the mother setting the terms. Whatever my parents did next, change, relapse, or something in between, I knew one thing with certainty. I was no longer theirs to break. And that was the real freedom. The first spring in our new house smelled like cedar mulch and fresh paint. The yellow front door gleamed even under gray skies. A beacon the twins called the sunshine door. August learned to pedal his bike on the cracked driveway, tongue sticking out in fierce concentration, while Lila twirled in the yard, her rain boots kicking up wet earth. I watched from the porch steps, a mug of coffee warming my hands, and felt something I hadn't in years, the quiet hum of enough. Enough food in the fridge. Enough money to pay the bills without panic. Enough strength to carry both children to bed when they fell asleep on the couch, their limbs heavy and trusting. The absence of my parents' demands left room for other voices, other people who wanted to stay without strings. Priya still came by 3 mornings a week, her laughter filling the kitchen as she helped with snacks and coloring projects. Weston visited more often too, tentative at first, then steadier, bringing picture books and admitting when he was lost. He sat on the floor with the twins, clumsy but earnest, and whispered one evening, I don't want to repeat their mistakes. The widow's circle became a second family. We rotated homes for potlucks, children weaving around our knees as we compared notes on daycare, grief, and the strange relief of realizing you weren't the only one stumbling through. My side business, Aster and Ash, grew faster than I expected. Memorial pages turned into custom design work, then into speaking invitations. For the first time, my creativity wasn't an afterthought. It was my livelihood, my legacy. My parents sent letters every few months. Real letters, not manipulations scrawled on postcards. Updates from therapy. Apologies repeated, not recycled. Once they mailed a photo of themselves volunteering at a food pantry, hairnets and tired smiles in place of cruise photos. I didn't reply immediately. Sometimes I didn't reply at all. But once in a while I sent back a short note with pictures of the twins. Guarded, deliberate, my boundaries intact. One Saturday after nearly a year I let them visit in person. A supervised playdate in the backyard, Priya and Weston there too, my conditions written out like commandments. No guilt, no questions about money, no undermining me in front of my children. They arrived nervous, smaller than I'd ever seen them, clutching picture books instead of shopping bags. My mother sat cross-legged on the grass, listening intently as Lila explained the rules of dinosaur tea parties. My father pushed August gently on the swing, his voice unsteady but careful. I stayed on the porch watching, ready to intervene, ready to end it if I had to. But for once they didn't perform. They just showed up. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't erasure of years of wounds. But it was something fragile, something new. That night after they left, I tucked the twins into bed. August, always precise, asked, "Will Grandma and Grandpa come back?" "Maybe," I said. "If they keep showing us they can be kind." "And if they're not kind?" Lila piped up, her eyes wide. "Then we won't see them," I answered, brushing hair from her forehead. "Because you deserve people who treat you with love. Always." They nodded, satisfied with the rule, and drifted to sleep. I stood in the doorway, listening to their breaths even out, and felt the weight of the promise I had made to myself in the hospital. My children will only know relationships that honor them. On the porch later, the night damp and cool, I opened my journal. 4 years, the pages had been filled with apologies I'd never sent, explanations I'd rehearsed for parents who never listened. Now I wrote something different. I am no longer the afterthought. I am the center of my own life. I am the mother who protects, the woman who chooses, the builder of new ground. I closed the book and leaned back against the doorframe of the house that was finally ours. The neighborhood was quiet except for the rustle of leaves and a dog barking 2 streets over. For once I wasn't waiting for a phone call to shatter it. Freedom didn't roar. It whispered. And in that whisper I finally heard myself.